Hey there, I'm Lindsay Dreyer, the Joyfulpreneur. Welcome to the Work-Life Juggle, the podcast for working moms where we talk about relationships, running a business, parenting, and self-care. Let's live your best life, ladies, and make some space for joy. Brandi, we are talking about being an entrepreneur abroad, and also I think we'll get into a little bit of being a mama abroad. So I am curious how you got to being an entrepreneur.
It's funny, not funny. I feel like I've always been an entrepreneur. And so one of the things when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Babysitters Club.
Yes.
I was obsessed with them. I was like, they're kids and they make money, mom. They make I remember I was obsessed. I was like, I'm going to have Babysitters Club. I want to do that. So when I was little, back when it was legal to do this, I'm sure I was babysitting at 11 or 12, getting my little, money. And the true thing is now I actually do have a Babysitters Club because I have a nanny agency. So I did actually follow through with that. But I always always wanted to maximize my time. And I remember when I was, this is probably my third year in college. We had to move to LA to finish my schooling. And I had got a job at Macy's in the shoe department. And it was I want to say $8 an hour and it's commission or whatever. And you're getting all dressed up, you're standing there all day. And someone recruited me as when I was there, it was you should go do this, go work in a cell phone or whatever and make sales. And the idea that if I worked harder, I can make more money to me was always appealing. This idea that I'm going to sit here every hour and make this, whether or not I do an amazing job or not amazing, was just not for me. And so I just, from that point forward, started finding things I saw oh, I'm good at doing this with parents and I can do this consulting thing. And I started to figure out how I could use what I knew to make money on my own time. So I feel I've always been an entrepreneur. My parents were entrepreneurs. And so I think it's just in my blood.
I also agree with you. I feel like you're born with the spark of you're just wanting to make money in creative ways. Yeah. So I'm with you. And also the getting paid for working. If you're putting in hours, I better be getting paid. That is how it is. Or
just knowing that if I work really hard, it's going to be different. You know what I mean?
Yes, but you'll be rewarded for it. Yes.
Yeah, I'm slaving in these high heels and this skirt and pantyhose sitting at Macy's. I was this is not for me. I worked for 1 month and I was you know what? Can't.
Oh,
c'est la vie.
Tell me a little bit about your company that you have now.
So years ago, I started with a nanny agency, and that came from, I was what people would consider a celebrity doula. So worked with tons of celebrities, high net worth people, to travel the world with them, basically showing them how to care for their children and do the work that they do. And in doing that, people started asking, well, how are you getting connected with these people? How do you, basically, how do you build a brand that is based on you and your expertise? And so from there, I started to coach people, mostly service-based women entrepreneurs, on how they could turn their knowledge, their expertise, their special sauce into something that was profitable. And so I started off doing retreats. At that time, I was going to Morocco, doing these retreats.
Fun.
And then that spurred into doing one-to-one coaching. Now it looks like my international retreats and my mastermind, but it really came from this idea of as women, how do we make more money for ourselves so we get to spend more time with our families, which is kind of what really spurred me to kind of take this quantum leap up. So I was this isn't for me. I was making the money, just probably 10 years ago. I was making good money, multiple six figures, but I worked probably 80 hours a week. And I was this was not the dream that I had envisioned for myself.
Well, it's also just not sustainable. Once you have children, you realize that your time and energy has really gone down.
But here's the thing, Lindsay, it's actually the problem for a lot of people is that it is sustainable because we've normalized it.
That is true. I will agree with you that we
do. You know what I mean? I was fine with it. I was making my money. I'm also a crazy workaholic. I could be. And I'm doing things that I love. It wasn't I was mining coal, which if you like mining coal, good for you. Don't send Lindsay or me any bad letters.
Please. Letters. I don't want any of that. Well, I also I'm not a fan of black lung. I'm kind of okay with that. So.
Yeah, I'm good. But you know what I'm saying? When you love it, I could have been doing that because when everyone else around you is doing it, it's normal. And so it was actually other people being like, you work a lot. I was like, no, I don't. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
You should take time off.
There is that double-edged sword of entrepreneurship where it's like your passion, you love it. You don't want motherhood to change your pace. So yeah, there is that like that push and pull of I'm just going to do both and I'm going to kick ass at both. I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Did you did you reach a point of burnout? Like what made you do that shift?
It wasn't much burnout. It was like, when you just have those reflections, for me, I feel like every time I have a kid, like, and I believe this when I work with parents, I would say this all the time. I feel like you're in this little portal for a moment of time where you are just raw from what's happened of just like bringing life into the world or whatever, however children come to you. And you have this time of self-reflection of like, okay, if I'm really going to do this thing, is it important enough for me to be away from these beautiful people that I've made? And with my third baby, who's now 5, and I've done that each time. At this point, I had a brick and mortar store that was doing really, really well. And I was kind of just like, oh, wow, this actually really sucks. What had happened is I had created a job for myself.
Right.
I had to be there from 9 to 5. Even if it's my own thing, I don't want to be there all day. And so I had created something that I thought was a dream, but set it up in a way that didn't work best for who I was and how I wanted to like be with my children. And so at this point, I was bringing my daughter to work with me because she was like, I got pregnant. I had a surprise third baby I got pregnant with when my daughter was 14 months. And so I was bringing her to work with me, which is like, great. You can bring your kid to work with you. It was a mom and baby store. So it was super like, flexible. And I remember thinking like, okay, so I'm going to bring both of them here and we're going to be here from 9 to 5. Like what?
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I could hire someone to take it over, but I was like, I actually don't even love it. What I thought I was getting from it wasn't that. Like I loved developing it. I loved marketing it. I loved curating it. But like, then I was ready to be done. Like I didn't want to be there every day, like doing inventory. And so I made the choice to walk away from it. And I'm saying walk away, just the brick and mortar. Like I still have the agency and like I pivoted, but it was still scary. It was like, 80% of our income and I was 7 months pregnant. But I think it's been those important times where I've been willing to like leap on faith where the biggest opportunities have come to me, which kind of then spurred us moving abroad.
Where do you feel like the bravery or the resilience comes in to make those leaps of faith?
Well, one thing, I got a grandma who's 102 and who's still with us. So if that tells you anything about the women in my family. We persevere. No, I mean, my mom is very strong. Like my parents got divorced when I was about 4 or 5. At this point, my parents have been married for 22 years. My mom had never worked. And so I think also seeing her, like she became a person who was different. Like she had to take care of things on her own. She went and got her bachelor's degree at 52 years old, got her master's like in her 60s. And so I think just seeing that from the women in my family, I have 2 older sisters, also super badass women. I think that's where I get it from. Like, seeing those examples of like, it's never too late. The worst thing that's going to happen is your ego might be bruised, but you're not going to die from this.
There's so much out there about building resilient children. And I'm curious, in your upbringing, what do you think contributed to your resiliency and ability to like bounce back and make these brave decisions?
I think that my parents expected that I was able to. I think a lot of people see their children as fragile and needing lots of support. And I don't think that my parents saw us this way. I never got that feeling that I wasn't capable of doing things. Like I could go and ask them if I was struggling with something, but they didn't feel this innate need to hover or to overly assist us with life. Like we got to make decisions for ourselves. We got to fail. We got to succeed. And I think that builds a confidence that a lot of kids aren't able to do now because they're so, I don't want to say overparented because I think there's a lot of worries and that's why parents are doing this. But I think there isn't a lot of chance for our kids to make the kind of life decisions that we got to make at younger ages.
I totally agree with you. I grew up in a similar environment where my mom was always there, but she's very hands off. And it was like she would let us cross this highway on our own when I was 7 years old. And I'm like still baffled by the trust and the like that she was able to just hands off, let us go ride our bikes across this highway. Like I still am shocked, but I do think having that empowerment and that feeling of my mom trusts me to do this. Like I'm going to step up to the task. Like she's trusting me with my own life. And I do think there's something to that when raising your kiddos is Like you have to trust them.
There's their trust.
Yeah. You have to let them fail.
Yeah, like they have to fail. And I think so many people want to protect their kids so much, they don't allow them to fail. And so that leads to people who don't have coping mechanisms. I was talking to a girlfriend recently about like one of the words that and people might hate this, but one of the words I would like to get rid of in 2023 is triggers.
What do you want to replace
and
it
with? With self-responsibility.
Perfect.
Like, because here's the thing. I think it's great that we're acknowledging things that trigger people. I think it's great that people can name their emotions, but I think what people have forgotten that it's still your responsibility to manage your triggers. It's not the world's responsibility. It doesn't mean that people need to be callous or they don't need to be cognitive of the fact that you're dealing with certain things. But in general, it's not other people's jobs to really manage your emotions and feelings. And I think that we've kind of changed it around with how we parent children, that we do make other people responsible for their feelings. They don't have to take responsibility when they're doing something. And so I think that, that's what happened, that people just don't have a lot of coping mechanisms. And so it's hard for them to have a leap of faith because they didn't get to do it and do that practice in those formative years.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's harder nowadays to be the type of parent that our mamas were to us?
I think it's harder in the United States for sure.
Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of scary things like, there's guns, there's so many things to worry about, there's meth and pills and so many things that we didn't have to worry about. But I feel like every generation says that as well, like these kids today. And I think that every generation has their thing. But I do think as a collective, people believed more in this idea that you could be a bit more hands off and you don't have that collective feeling anymore. So it's hard to be the odd man out or the odd mama out when everyone else is doing it a certain way. I think about like one of my girlfriends who in LA, we lived in what would be considered a very calm, non-problematic suburb. And her daughter is, at this point, I think she was 11 or 12, was at the library and she wanted to stay longer. And she's okay, just walk home. We're talking about like a block.
Yeah.
Well, a woman followed her out of the library and called the police.
Oh my gosh.
But the police gave my friend like a super big tongue lashing for letting her daughter walk a block. And so as a parent, like, even if you want to parent this way, it can feel scary to give your kids more leeway. But I think it's stalling their ability to be able to trust themselves and their gut when they don't get to make mistakes. Because sometimes you can make a mistake and realize, you know what, I knew what to do, but I went against my gut.
Exactly.
And if you don't get to practice that, then it can hurt you later, but it definitely can hurt you as an entrepreneur. I would definitely say that.
So let's talk about your transition to France. How did that come about?
So I had a client, like I said, I should say previously, I still am like what people consider a parenting expert. I had a client who was an actress who was delivering a baby, an American actress, but was filming a TV show in Nice. And basically, I ended up going for a 6-month contract. But the funny thing about this, I had posted on Facebook, I wanted to explore the south of France. I want to do like slow travel. I just want to spend some time there. Like I wrote that in Facebook. About 10 days later, a woman messaged me and was like, there's a woman who's looking for a doula who lives in France who speaks French. I was like, well, I don't live in France and I don't speak French, so I can't help her. She's like, well, can you please just call her because maybe my husband's French, could like help her navigate or whatever, and you can give her some resources. I said, okay, cool. So I called this number, which actually wasn't the client, it was a friend of the client. And she actually lived in my neighborhood. But anyone who lives in LA knows how incredibly crazy and insane it would be that this person would live in my neighborhood. But again, intuition, I was like, okay, I should go see this person. They live in my neighborhood. And so she ended up saying, yes, I'm brokering for my friend. She's looking for this. And I was like, oh, I don't do that. I'm triple this price. Like, I'm not her person. Like all the no's. And so an hour later, I go home. She messaged me. She's like, she still wants to meet you. And so I told my husband, I was like, if I get on the phone with this later, we're going to have to move to France. Are you okay with that? And it's just like the intuition. Like I knew when something is so synchronous, like there's that synchronicity that you have to pay attention to it. And so he's like, okay. And so I had the phone call, we FaceTime, and 23 days later, we moved to the south of France, which was supposed to be for 6 months, and we kept extending it. And then we decided to do like a little bit of half and half, but then the pandemic happened and we ended up spending the whole pandemic there. And so now I'd say we're probably more 60% France, 40% States.
So I love that you have this experience of being in both countries, not only as an entrepreneur, but as a mom. So let's dive into the entrepreneur piece for a little bit. How does it feel, or what do you see between the entrepreneurial culture of the United States and the entrepreneurial culture of France?
I would say that the States is much more entrepreneurial. And so that's something for people thinking about, regardless of what country you're going to. There's a lot of countries that aren't very entrepreneurial. France, like they love their paperwork. They don't like things to be digital. They love bureaucracy. They want you to fill out 20, like they don't make it easy to be an entrepreneur. So I think that kind of stifles that entrepreneurial spirit. But I think, I say to myself, like, what I love about being American, and this is something that I have been able to appreciate because I've been abroad in some different countries, is our optimism and our sense of like, I can create something and turn it into this $100 billion thing, where maybe other places where people aren't doing that as much or they're not seeing it don't have that same level of optimism that we have and ability to take risk. And so I noticed that just, we lived in Asia before, going to France. And so I would say that it's a different spirit where I feel like people are very used to like trying their luck in the United States. And so I think that there is probably more of the entrepreneur spirit in the States. But what I would say about the entrepreneurs that are in France, there is less idea that to do it requires you to hustle.
Okay.
Because it's not in their culture to do that. And so I think that I have become a better entrepreneur being abroad because I've learned for me, working less has meant more revenue. And I grew up with the idea that like the harder I work, the more money, that's how you're going to make your money. You got to work really hard. And then I started seeing like, I know a lot of rich people who ain't doing crap. Like they're at home, they're at the cafe. Like, yeah. Why are they not working so hard? They're still making this money. How does that work? So I think that being in an environment where, another thing in France, like I feel like in the States, we're very defined by what we do. Mm-hmm. You meet someone, the first thing people ask you, so what do you do? That would never happen in France. People will never ask you that unless you have gotten through levels of like acquaintanceship, because people aren't kind of categorizing you by what you do and how much you make. Like, do I like you or not? Do I want to talk to you? Like, that's kind of more of the gist of it. And so I think that because you are less defined by what you do there, people don't take that as seriously. Like when work is done, work is done. You hang out with your family. You're with your kids at the park at 4:30, having goûter snack. You are doing apéro at 5:30, 6 o'clock, or after work if you work in a corporate environment. There just isn't the society's not going to help you be a workaholic. And so I think that has allowed me to become more relaxed when it comes to my own work, just being in an environment where people really believe that living well is as important as building this business.
I think it's impossible to not ask this because of the difference between the United States and France, but do you feel like the social safety nets that France has in place, and if you can give some examples of it, really help support you as an entrepreneur?
For sure. I mean, people talk a lot of, people from the United States like talk a lot about, but the taxes. Yeah. And it's like, you guys don't realize you're paying those taxes. It's just called something else. It's called preschool. It's called private school. It's called health insurance. It's called college tuition. You're paying it, or maybe you can't afford to pay it. And you just end up staying in a different social class, unfortunately. And so, yes, I think what I feel is there's less desperation by people because their basic human needs are met. Are there homeless people? Yes. Is there a homeless epidemic in Europe? Anywhere I've seen? No. People have their basic needs met. So I think it takes away a lot of the stress. I mean, specifically speaking, as a mother, one of the major concerns that women have, particularly entrepreneurs, is childcare.
Oh, yeah.
Quality childcare. And so thinking about we never really had like babysitters and things like that when we were in the States, but we were paying for school and preschool for my son. And it is at a very, very part-time. We were paying about $1,200 a month. We have 3 children. And so we could have easily been paying $4,000 a month just for minimal child, coverage, where in France, childcare, it is by income. And so if you go to what we call the crèche, which people here would think of it as a daycare, but it's a little bit more established than that. It'd be like as if babies went to preschool.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of like that. That's a better way to explain it. And you could be paying anywhere from $0 to $3 an hour for very good quality childcare. And so that evens a playing field that I know, regardless if I'm living in the hood or I live in the fanciest neighborhood in Paris, my kids can get a balanced meal. They're going to have, education. They're going to go start primary school with basic, being able to count and being able to recognize shapes and letters. And that's not going to depend on where I live. It's a standardized system. So I think that does help, particularly for women who generally tend to be, very in charge of what's happening with the household and their kids' schooling and kind of in charge of that. It takes a big load off if you know that you are in a situation or a community where the government actually values that and helps you with it.
So do you see the stratification in classes there like you do in the States?
Yes, I think that you do. There definitely is. I mean, there's always have and have nots because people say socialism, but France is also capitalist, just like like we are here. They're capitalists, but they just have some things they think are basic human needs that everybody should have, and so they still are a capitalist country. So yeah, there's definitely haves and have nots. I think what a lot of people who live outside of Europe talk about is like, oh, we just have people who just don't want to work and they just take off the system and we have to pay for it. And maybe there are people like that. I don't know. What I find usually they're hardworking people or immigrants or people who don't have the education or background to kind of come up from some of those lower social classes. But I think it's a lot less in your face than in the States because people do have those basic needs, Matt. Like we're all hanging out at the same park. You're all shopping at the same places. People can still afford to go to the movies, go out to eat, even if they are making minimum wage, which in France is probably about 1,300 euros a month, which I guess that'd be roughly $1,400 is minimum wage. But the average French person makes about 2,000 euros a month, a little bit less. So we're talking about 2,250 or so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking if healthcare and childcare is taken off of my monthly budget, that would be a massive savings.
Yeah. So, when people think like south of France, they think, oh my God, fancy, like, yachts and, yeah, you could have that fancy life. But in general, from coming from Los Angeles, our expenses are probably about 50% less just for us healthcare. So for a family of five, as me and my husband are both entrepreneurs, we paid about $1,800 a month for health insurance. So you take that and the $4,000 to $5,000 that we'd have been paying for preschool for our children, that alone was a good $6,000 to $7,000 a month just in school and health cost. As a family of five in France, it could be zero for health insurance. We actually pay for a private plan, and that's about a little under $200, and that basically covers things like, dentist, vision, chiropractic care, or gives you more coverage if you had like a surgery that you get like the nice, hospital, and not like the average one, like that kind of stuff. But, a little less than 200 a month for a family of five isn't bad.
That's incredible. So I'm sold. I'm ready. I'm ready to move to France.
Come on, I'm recruiting.
I'm here. I mean, I'm half French Canadian, so I feel like I should.
You're in.
I'm in. So tell me about the visas and just getting over there. Are you contending with any of that because you're kind of part-time?
I'm not.
Okay.
Because my husband's French.
Got it.
Here's what I can say. So we've done it. So when we first did this, it's like when I lost my mind and closed my store and moved to Asia. Because I was like, because I was hormonal and with child. So when we went, our kids were 2 months, 2 years, and 10. And we went to Thailand. Our goal was to stay there for the year. And then we got there, we realized this is really beautiful after 3 or 4 months, but we're not really beach people. We're not going to the beach every day. It was gorgeous, but I think we got island fever after a couple of months. And so we decided to go to Vietnam, which was a better fit for us. But with those places, the visa was pretty easy. You do have to pay for them. You need to, do the paperwork in advance, but it was fairly easy to navigate. I think people overthink a lot of this stuff. If you're thinking about moving to a country, connect with the consulate wherever it is in your city. So for example, they had a Thai consulate in Los Angeles, or you can connect with them online and it will tell you step by step what you need to do to be able to stay for, a short period of time or extended period of time to apply for those things. Generally, they want to be able to see that you can support yourself, that you have health insurance. You can get a kind of global policy that's pretty inexpensive. I want to say it was something like $400 or something as a one-time fee. And it covered if you needed to be evacuated or, you got some crazy virus, that kind of stuff. And so they want to be able to tell that you can take care of those things, but it wasn't that difficult. France, on the other hand, if you are, as an American, you don't need a visa to go there. You can be there for 90 days or less without a visa. If you want to stay longer, you would have to apply for something, and you want to do that before you get in the country. So if you're planning to come for like a year or something, you'd want to do that paperwork ahead of time. And so a couple of ways to do that would be to come as a student. And so you can get a student visa. I have a couple of friends who have done artist visa. So one of my friends is a animator. He used to be an animator for Nickelodeon and was able to, show his portfolio, et cetera. He did hire a lawyer, was able to get a artist visa that allowed him, to get a residency status to be able to stay. And with the resident card, you usually renew it every couple of years. It's not a super expensive thing to do by American standards, but it is very laborious, time consuming. Again, France loves paperwork. So I think they're one of the harder places because they don't have a lot of things digitized. And so you're going to an office with a phone that no one answers, and like just, hoping that it all works out. And so I think it's probably one of the harder countries when visas get into play, but like places like Spain, Italy, I think are a little bit easier when it comes to their visa situation. Portugal, for example, has the golden visa, where you can, if you buy property that's 250K or more, you can get residency and a path to citizenship. And so because it's the EU, whether you get your citizenship in Portugal or France or, Italy or wherever, you still can live in these other countries because of the EU status.
That's really cool. Tell me about parenting considerations abroad. Like, what do you do about schools?
It really depends. I would have to say that we have some luck in this, that my kids actually speak French.
Mm-hmm.
My husband only spoke French to them, so they do speak French. And so our kids went to public school. And so that was really easy. Now, people don't know this, but in France, let's just say you have an English speaking kid that doesn't speak one lick of French, they can still go to public school, and the school will provide lessons and tutoring with them, and like basically have someone they practice their French with. Now, it might be a difficult transition for your child depending on what age they are, but they definitely do have things set up where your kid could go to public school and still get that language consideration. I think a lot of parents worry about the language of their children, where they should be more worried about their own language skills, because kids are like sponges.
I know.
You know what I mean? And like 6 months later, they're perfectly speaking the language, regardless of the age. And so I think if you have a kid, 13 or less, they're going to pick up the language. I think in France, particularly, it'd be very difficult to really integrate yourself into the country without learning the language, because French people are very particular about their language. And it's hard to penetrate like friend groups if you don't speak the language, or you'll just end up hanging out with only people who are from abroad. Yeah,
I feel like you need to get on your Duolingo or Babbel or whatever before you make that move.
Exactly. It's just, you have to attempt, because honestly, like I had no interest in like speaking French. I'll tell my husband, because I live in LA. I'm from Texas. I speak Spanish. Those two places, that's very useful. French is not, it was never on my list of like languages to learn. It's a very difficult language. But obviously being there, and speaking it, you're going to get much more out of it than going to a class online. So yes, definitely do I did Babbel, which I think is super, super useful. Duolingo is great too, but I think at Duolingo at some point I was able to guess the answer.
So funny.
Yeah. But with Babbel, like you have to actually, because the problem with France is that they're very particular about the grammar, and there's all kinds of rules and things that the only way you can do it is by memorization. And so you have to be doing it over and over and over to get it. And so getting into conversation with people and hearing the same things over and over again, it makes it easier to learn. But yeah, it's difficult language. And I think I feel like in Spain or Mexico or Italy, people are just so excited that you're trying to like learn their language. They give you a little bit more leeway. In France, like I'm at the bakery and they're like, no, you don't say it like this. You say it like this.
Are you serious? Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. And so it makes me self-conscious to speak French, because they will critique you like random people. So
yeah, I took 5 years of French
it very seriously
in high school, and like I don't really remember a lot of it, but if you don't use it, you lose it. And I'm sure if I went to France, they would probably be like, no, it's not merci, it's merci.
Like, that's my daughter. She's like, Mom, it's not merci, it's merci.
Yeah.
Look at my lips.
Merci. You have to clear your throat. If you are not clearing your throat, you are not French. Okay.
Exactly. So yeah, language is something that is, you'd want to work on it for France. But I think there's so many ways to do that. It's not the biggest thing. Like you still can make friends, and people just learn, and people don't actually, like, and they just muddle through and it's fine. But
I feel like with Google Translate nowadays, like you're just going to bust out there's going to be AI where you can it's going to read
I
your
know.
mind.
Do we really even need to now?
No, we don't. We don't need to.
So yeah, I wouldn't worry. But these are things I think the details that people get caught up on that keep them from making the leap. It's sometimes like just buying the ticket, picking a day, renting the Airbnb or the place requires you to stretch yourself and then figure it out when you get there. Like everything doesn't have to be figured out. And I think that's why a lot of people aren't able to make those leaps because they get caught on these details that really don't matter.
What I'm so impressed with you because you did it with kids. And I think that that's an excuse that a lot of us use is that, oh, I can never do that because I have kids. So did that ever go through your mind?
No. And I think my coaching clients, they know, like, don't even try that with me. Like, I can't because my daughter I was like, okay, stop. No, it didn't, and again, like I had a mom who did her thing and she really prioritized her time as well. And so I think that if anything, I'm every day in gratitude that I've been able to give them this life and to show them what's possible, that you can live where you want to live. You can do it on your terms. You don't have to get the 9 to 5. If you want to do it,
yeah.
There's so many ways to do this. If you're happy, then that's all that's important. So I didn't ever consider, but when we were talking about going to Thailand, I was pregnant, right? With my third. Our family literally was having conniption fits. They were like, you're going to go with a 2-month-old to Thailand. And I'm like, I think they have 2-month-old babies in Thailand. I'm sure there are some somewhere.
Pretty sure there's a few.
But again, I started to learn that a lot of people's indignation about your decisions are usually their own fears they're projecting onto you. And so I always tell people when you're kind of not really sure about a decision that you've made, but you're really excited about it, you got to get smart about who you're sharing that with and not, because when you're still kind of not on, strong footing and trying to do something that's beyond your comfort zone, you don't need to be hearing from a lot of naysayers and people saying like, oh, this is stupid, or my friend did that and she lost all her money, or whatever the case may be. You need to keep some of that stuff to yourself or find a group of people who can really connect with what you're doing, support you, and then also give you real advice. Like, yeah, maybe this is a bad decision. You should do X, Y, and Z first, but talk to people who aren't telling you things from a place of fear.
Totally. I think like opening yourself up to all of that unsolicited advice is never healthy for anybody. That's why part of the reason why I can't stand social media now is like you'll post something that's not even asking for advice and you'll get like 100 things of advice. And you're like, I wasn't asking for advice, guys.
It's like, thanks
so much. All right. So how can people find you if they want to connect with you? You are like the pregnancy, postpartum parenting expert. You have so many awesome resources. Where can we do some more digging?
Yeah. So my personal Instagram is Brandi with an I _Jordan _official. And for kind of like coaching and motivation kind of things, you can find me at the Brandi Jordan, same spelling. And that's where you'll find me hanging out. And I'm also on Facebook because I'm old. So
oh my gosh, I know, me too. I don't want to confess about that, but
I will. I post a lot there, and I'm going to say it proudly. I'm on Facebook.
You're so brave. Okay, fine. You're encouraging me to do it too. I'm on Facebook.
So you can find me there. You'll actually see me posting more there. So I'll probably actually respond if you post to me if you're posting me. I mean, I will respond to my DMs, but I'm actually more posting on Facebook than I am anywhere else.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, thank you so much. This was such an awesome conversation. We got into it all, like entrepreneurship, parenting, culture. I mean, this is great.
So everyone, just get packed. Go where you want to go. Make it happen.
Amen. I have a question for you. Would you like to stop fighting about the dishes, the laundry, and everything else household related? Well then, ladies, I got something for you. I have my mini course, and it is called Creatively, I Know, How to Stop Fighting About the Dishes. Also, did I mention that it is free? Check the show notes for the link, and hopefully it will help you stop fighting about the dishes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Work Life Juggle. Your support means the world to me. So if you loved this episode, share it on social and tag me on Instagram at the.joyfulpreneur. I will choose one lucky winner per quarter to get a free one-on-one 1-hour coaching session with me where we can talk about fair play or your business. Until next time, stay joyful.